evening, good evening. Nice to see friendly and known faces, and a new one. I'm glad I've got a number of known faces tonight, because this is not a beginner's talk, as it were. It's not a beginner's subject. I haven't prepared for things in the way that I normally would, which isn't that much anyway, but because I wanted to see who was here to decide how I was going to organically move through this. So to have so many known faces is very useful to me. As I'm going through tonight, what I want you to be doing as I'm talking is, I would like you to be mentally doing the same things that I am doing. So when I'm talking about drawing character or describing character, I'd like you to be mentally doing that, physically doing that, imagining that you're doing it any which way, but I would like you to be an active participant in that respect. Because this is where we're moving from using words and symbols, which is what we've always talked about up until now, and we're now going to be looking at becoming the word and the symbol. And we're moving from reflective, observer, descriptive mind to felt mind, to substantial mind, to raw mind, which is experiential mind, it's embodied mind. And the journey tonight is about how we can bridge the gap from everyday rational intellectual awareness to that felt and substantial place that most of you will have touched at moments in your life of either connection with nature, connection with another human, meditation, lovemaking, dance, all those things where usually mind feels suspended somehow. And normally we attach it to that action, whatever it is, meditation, lovemaking, dance. So to experience that thing, people will go out dancing, or they'll go make love, or they'll go meditate. This is about how the mind can experience that feeling of seamless integration with the rest of self, but as a walked journey from how it operates just now. This really is the new paradigm. And I actually went out of my way to get you some meaning of new paradigm so you could know what it means, because so many words I feel have been overused and abused because people are using them without referring to substance. And so everything's become whimsical, it's become empty. So certain words have become so empty, and I feel even words like spiritual or multidimensional have become empty. You know, what do you mean by that? And it's because people aren't using it from a place of substance. Now, those of you that have been at my events before, which is most of you guys, you'll know that a lot of the time part of the excitement, the buzz the mind gets is because it feels, it knows that I'm referring to substance. But what we're doing tonight is the next level of that. So up until now, we've been looking at when the idea of freeing the mind or opening the mind is being pouring new ideas into the same old walls and ceiling of a mind. And the previous ideas of where we've just looked at picking a few words apart, or starting to look at the structure of the walls and the roof of the mind, which is the alphabet. Today we're going to look at how to repair and evolve the walls and the roof of the mind to meet your experiential capacity and what you've experienced. And this is so that the mind is able to take a shape that is fitting for your evolved experience. Because that's the thing at the minute, the mind isn't catching up. So let's look at what paradigm means. So lots of people say, yeah, new paradigm, new paradigm. They don't even know what the word paradigm means, which is amazing. Does anybody here know what paradigm means? It's basically, it's either a standard or it is a set of mutually exclusive terms, but the same term. So a good example of a paradigm in terms of language is the word sound. So you and I might use sound in a place like this, a music cafe, to refer to the music coming out the speakers. But in architecture, the sound is the integrity of the building. Now that's a different paradigm use of the word sound. Now obviously from those of you that have done sound work with me before, you'll know that it's not actually a new paradigm because it is about sound, but it's just the best example I can give. But I've got some definitions here I just want to read out to you because they're really good and they're very relevant to exactly what we're going to cover tonight. So just give me a moment to bring them up. Okay, so this is from Wikipedia, and it says, in science or epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, so that's the application tonight, a paradigm is a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories and methods and standards for what constitutes a field or contributions to a field. Now, paradigm shift, Wikipedia, in a book by Kuhn, K-U-H-N, I don't know when he wrote it, but he said, successive transition from one paradigm to another is via revolution is the usual developmental pattern of a mature science. Paradigm shifts tend to appear in response to anomalies or an accumulation of them, as well as the proposal of a new theory with the power to encompass both older relevant data and explain relevant anomalies. New paradigms tend to be most drastic in sciences that appear to be stable and mature. And they give the example of physics at the end of the 19th century, because Lord Kelvin at the time said there is nothing new to be discovered in physics. All that remained is a more precise measurement. And he said that just a few years before Albert Einstein published his paper on relativity and brought about a new paradigm in the field of physics. Now, there was one other point I wanted to make here, which is paradigm paralysis, which is on Wikipedia. So paradigm paralysis is the greatest barrier to paradigm shifts, which is the inability or refusal to see beyond the current models of thinking. And this is similar to what psychologists call confirmation bias. So this is an example of that is when Galileo's theory of the Earth being round was dismissed by everybody around. That was paradigm paralysis. Now what I've just read out there is exactly what we'll be doing tonight, because the ingrained science that we're talking about is the science and use of language. It's totally ingrained and it's rigid, and despite the beautiful agility many of you have with expressing your deepest aspirations and your greatest hopes and your dexterity and beauty of the use of word, you are using a distorted model. You're ninjas in a wheelchair. Okay, you're actually ninjas with it, and it's like tonight we'll be looking at how you can get rid of that wheelchair and get up and walk with that incredible mind of yours. It really is a whole new paradigm. Now, I just want to go back to one of those descriptions because I really like it. Let's see. I've never read this before coming in here tonight, so it's quite useful. So here we go. Paradigm shifts tend to appear in response to critical anomalies or an accumulation of them. Now, from the previous work that you've seen with me on language, you'll know that I'm always picking out these anomalies in our use of language. But today we're going to get right to the roots of it all and forget about words themselves. We're going to the building blocks of words, which are, as you know, the alphabet. Now, M. Scott Peck, I've mentioned him before, I'll mention him again. M. Scott Peck, amazing American psychiatrist, wrote books on human love, human evil, and human community. And he talks about coming to terms with something. And he says, my job as a psychiatrist is to help people come to terms with how they feel. Because when they come to me, they don't know how they feel. Now, I related to that because when I was a teenager, I remember so many times waking up and going, I don't feel like I feel like that. What is it? My mum would say, are you all right? What's wrong? And I'd be like, I don't know, because I hadn't come to terms with how I feel. Now, the alphabet is something that humanity has not come to terms with because it doesn't have a proper name. So across the whole of Europe, there's around 15 distinct languages that use the same 4-character set. And they can't understand each other. It's a staggering feature of mind. Here's the most amazing feature of mind, though, is that if you were born in one of those nations, you would have been able to learn that language as easily as you did English just by listening, which is how you learn English, just by listening. That's an astonishing feat of awareness. And most people think that level of awareness isn't in them anymore, but it is. It's just busy in the old paradigm use of the alphabet. So across Europe, alphabet has the name alphabet, alphabeto, abc, abcd, and other variations like that. That is not a true name. It is simply the first few characters. So alphabet is from the Greek, first two characters, alpha, beta, abc, which is what they use in Czech, that's just the first three characters, literally, the abcd, which is 4 characters. So it doesn't have a name. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary, or Reference Dictionary, says old alphabets are pictographic because they were pictures. Modern alphabets are symbolic. And it says no more. It doesn't tell you what they're symbols of, because people don't know. Tonight we're going to be looking at what they are symbols of, so you can get a sense of the function of the alphabet at a core level, and then we're going to look at what is wrong with our alphabet, how to correct it, how to evolve it, and the effect that that has on language and mind. So a small aspiration. A lot of people have used that as the example of the potential spiritual ascension of humanity or the unification of humanity. And there is elements of fantasy in that because it's almost a magical hope that it could be so straightforward. Now, what we're going to do here tonight is to show how that leap can be achieved in the mind, but by taking a step from where we are today into that brave new world, as it were. And this is the thing, is that leaps do not happen. Steps take place from where you are, from what is, to what is to come. There is no leap. You cannot abandon what was. The new now, from what you were saying earlier about there being only now, the new now is not woven out of nothingness. It is woven out of what is here now and the preceding now. So the leap doesn't take place. It's a change of what is to what is something new. So there's a transition involved here. So the transition here is the evolution of our language. Now, when you are taught the alphabet, you are taught only one form properly. You're taught generally an aspect of masculine character. So there is gender even in the alphabet. There's gender in the whole thing. So you are taught, so here we have the line page. So you get taught, so this is a line page like you would get at school, and I have to put a dashed line across the middle of the page just to define it. That's all, the middle of the line. Now, when you are taught characters like B or C or E, you tend to get taught them like that, where they're standalone. That's the masculine character, that's the specific point. That is the detail of the character. Now I use the word character very specifically because what we are talking about here is character development. And character development is meant on all levels that you can imagine character development. So I do actually mean the development of you as a soul character in personality seeking to embody your highest aspirations and potential. We won't go into the full detail of it tonight, but our character development has been arrested. And it's been arrested in two ways: by manipulation of the basic shapes, which is what we did in the last shapeshift, in the first shapeshift talk. And in this one, we're going to look at where that's taking place in the alphabet, which is the building blocks of your aspirations, or the building blocks of your expression of aspiration, the building blocks of your expression full stop. And if it's arrested at the basic building block level, then it's like a leaning tower of Pisa, where the foundations are wonky and everything you build with it has the wonkiness built in, everything. Now, one of the effects of that wonkiness is a spasming and chaotic and difficult to control mind. The reason for that is the basic shapes that we looked at in the last session, which is because the mind is disembodied and disconnected, like a lightning bolt is seeking to earth and seeking to anchor, and it can't. So it's frantically running around its own maze, and that's keeping people very, very busy in one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is to do with those things become coping. We learn things that are coping strategies. So people might learn to meditate to calm their mind, or they might go and learn a dance practice to switch it off. Now they might think that's me, I've dealt with my problem of my mind. But all they've done is levelled off. So say it's a leaning tower of Pisa. So say the wonkiness is down here. There's the sort of like leaning tower. And we notice that the building of our mind that we're building has a lean or a wobble built in. So what we do is we say, right, okay, I'm going to shore it up here with this coping strategy. So now I feel level, so say meditation, dance, whatever. That's our coping strategy. So then the building appears to be going straight up after that point. And we think it's fixed. But it's just a coping strategy. It's not the repair. Today we're going to look at the repair at this level, at the absolute foundation where the wonkiness was built in, which is at character level. So, obviously you don't learn only that way of writing. The other way you learn to write is feminine, which is what you would call joined up writing. So if I did, the word be. I don't know why, that was just the word that first came out. So, be, but that's joined up writing, where it's connected. That's feminine in its nature. It's about the process and the connection between the characters. But that isn't actually true feminine character. because it started off in thin air, like this. It started off like a printed character. So actually, to truly understand feminine character, you have to start off on the line. So I'm not going to draw a word, I'm going to do some characters now. As I'm drawing this, I just think you get a sense of the feel of what's happening. So that is actually the A. So I can do a whole line of those. And then I can say the C, which is one you have seen on the leaflet for tonight's talk. And what does the C look like? The C! Exactly! It looks like the C. And so all of the characters become something else when we see them in their feminine form. And we find out what the alphabet really is, and it is an oscilloscope for the mind, registering the activity of your mind. And what's actually happening is, so when we're looking at this level of character, there's a science of language. And I call it a science because it is just, so a science has a few hallmarks to it. And that is that you have a method that is repeatable with repeatable results. That's what makes something a science. Now here's the interesting thing, if you imagine that the science of the world has been going on for a long time, right since the beginning of time. And it began with early science, original science was stone, stick. Stick, stone, to stick, have axe. Now this is science of the quality of objects, yeah? And we just found the relationship between objects, and we managed to make things in the world and explore the world. Now that rudimentary science of the relationship and function between objects went on for a very, very long time. But then there came a point when we realised the stick and the stone were made up of smaller parts. And we were able to delve into those smaller parts and find out that they had qualities of their own. And that by understanding the smaller parts more, we could understand the stone and the stick in more detail, and we could do more with them. And I'm referring to molecular understanding here. So we found out that they were made up of molecules. And I was like, wow, look what I can do with the molecular level. And then I can do so much more with the stones and the sticks now that I understand this level underneath it. But then we found out the molecules were made up of smaller parts again. These atom things. And then we found out that by using just atoms, we could do so much more with the stick and the stone and even the smaller bits. But then we found out the atoms were made up of smaller bits. We started to get into quantum theory and quarks and all that sort of stuff, and now there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening because we've got to this deep level of penetration into the substance of the world. We deeply penetrated the substance of the world in that way. And the science of language is no different to that journey. And we're just emerging from the period of being Ugg and Zog with our stick and stone making axe, which is how the rudimentaries of using language, which is, I went to the shop and I bought some cake. That's sticking the stone and the stick together to achieve a rudimentary function. For those of you that have been playing at the sort of the molecular level of sound, that's when you're starting to get into things like the word atonement being used by Buddhists to be at-one-ment. Okay? Or in my work, atonement. Or other words like responsibility being generally understood now as being, wait, that's responsibility. Those are the molecules of the word responsibility. And actually it means something completely different. Totally different. It's totally different meaning. Does everybody know that about responsibility? Yeah. Now the important point of that is, for those that don't know, does anybody here know the difference between responsibility as it's generally understood and responsibility, which is ability to respond? What's the difference between the two?
One's control and one's not.
One's
control.
Control, that's an interesting word. I would use a different word, but we'll come back to you. Thank you for that, yeah?
Like one is in the now, like how you respond to that?
Yeah, one is in the now, yeah. These are both two good stabs at it, and they're both valid. If I can try and bundle them into one thing, and to say that one can be given the other one can't. So I can give you responsibility for the chalk,
Yeah.
but your ability to respond can only be demonstrated. Can't be given. Nobody can give you it. Now you imagine all jobs that have responsibility in them. If getting the job was measured by your ability to respond, how many people would be in the jobs that they're in? Not as many. They would be. Would David Cameron be in his job as a result of his ability to respond? I'm really not convinced. The point I make there, though, is that each successive penetration into the level of meaning of an idea, the understanding is transformed. It's transformed. And the further we penetrate into the substance of sound, language, just like penetrating to molecular and atomic levels, what can be achieved and understood increases exponentially. Now, when we're looking at the level of the alphabet, we're dealing with atomic character. Atomic character, the energy of the atom of your mind, the atomic power of your mind can be unleashed if we can get into how your mind uses and perceives these things, because there's a lot of energy locked in it. It's about trying to, how can we unlock that? Now, one is the word itself, that's like stick and stone. Level 2 is what I call the syllabic molecule, or the syllable. So that's a syllable. Now, by giving you this system here today, the point is that there's a lot of wordplay going on in the world at the moment, and there's a lot of like what they call lexigramming and stuff, which is actually just using any potential meaning in a word and saying that it is as valid as every other. What we'll be showing tonight is that that's rubbish. That's just playing around without understanding what's going on. Because really, it's not every word is not an anagram where every word that can be made out of it has equal meaning within that. That's not the case at all. The way we pick it apart is by how we use the words, because that's what will guide us into the substance of experience. So level 2 is the syllable, level 3 is the character, and level 4 is the blank page. So quantum character, quantum point of consciousness, remember the line in the circle from the basic shapes, what's happening is awareness is moving in form. So you have living languages and dead languages. I just want to make a very clear point here about living language and dead language, or living word, dead word. There are languages being spoken today by people who would say their language is alive, and it's not, it's dead. It's a dead language. There are even millions of speakers of dead languages. And it's dead because there is nobody left who innately understands the rules of that language, so they can invent new words within that language to refer to unfolding meaning and evolution. So what you'll find is for some European languages and languages in other countries, that because of the dominant languages being kind of Spanish, English, Chinese, what you'll find is when new concepts are, say, invented in English, those speakers of dead languages will simply take the English word and use standard prefixes and suffixes of their language to make it sound like the rest of the words. Wherever that's the case in a language, it's a dead language, because they don't understand the rules of the language to be able to make it their own. So there's actually very few living languages left on the planet. English is one of them. And the thing that makes it alive is that each of us can reuse the terms to mean new things. We use complex things like analogy, metaphor, innuendo. These are indicators of a living language, because the meaning can shift and evolve and transform. Whereas in a dead language, the meaning is fixed and it will never change. So this is why the law is in Latin, because it's a dead language. The meaning is fixed, it will never change. And that was why it was used for law, because it was like, this is where we can set our law books virtually in stone, because these meanings will never change. So it's quite a profound difference there. So what we're dealing with here is a living language. And in fact, I'm going to get on and say a few controversial things about this particular language that we're using just now in just a bit. So when we're talking about the livingness of this language, say with the B, for example, so the moving point of consciousness is basically moving, and it's achieving points of insight or points of capacity about itself and the world as it's moving. So if we just draw this line, so imagine this is the lined page over here again. So with the B, what's happening is the point of, so I'm going to have to give you something that at the moment will be a theory for you. Hopefully in time, you will see it and experience it as fact. But basically, then this applies to all languages. The lower half of the lined page refers to the lower self, the personality, or the lower three chakras. So the lower three chakras. Once we get above to the top half of the page, you talk about the higher self, the soul, the higher three chakras. The bottom line is the root chakra, the top line is the crown. The realm in between is for the mind to express its experience of the whole range of being human. And I have a theory, it is just a theory, but the cultural differences actually stem from alphabets. So you'll find that people who share a similar alphabetic structure, regardless of their language, will be culturally similar. They'll be culturally similar. So from places that you don't want to be listening. Okay, really, really significant. So F is not always fallen. It's not always. Then we have the capital F. What's the capital F related to? E. What's different? Without ground. This is about ascension. We're starting to ascend now. We don't need, so you don't need that earthly body anymore as we're starting to get to capital F. So this is about the moving, the actual evolution from being anchored in the lower self of personality, being rooted in emotion and mind, to starting to be rooted in heart and temple. Called the temple for a reason. Okay? Starting to be rooted in heart and temple. Which then brings us to the greatest character, which is what?
G.
It's the G! Yes! G is amazing. But G is the first truly fallen character. Truly fallen. Because nobody, other than people that I've worked with, writes with their G online, inline, aligned. So it's under. It's not meant to be. G is supposed to be this. Which is about the upliftment of this shape to the higher world and maintaining it there. It's soul awareness. Well, it's actually about the letter 9. It's about the number 9. So it's directly related. And these marry together in the word benign. So benign as a word, and now we'll do it with proper uplifted character. Benign, if you said it how you saw it, it would be benign. Okay, benign isn't a word, is it? And it's because this actually is not a G. It's a 9 out of context. And all of the silent characters, every one of them, provide paradigm shifting control groups for the mind that's trapped in a maze to unlock the secret doors out. So the codex of mind that you were given, especially in English, has a code to break to get out of it, and it's through silent letters and the numbers. We will look at the numbers later. So the alphabet is the journey of consciousness and form on the planet. The numbers is the journey of human evolution. It's human evolution. We'll look at the numbers in a bit. So benign, the state of being benign, is the bridge between the two. And to be benign is... So some people in Buddhism and stuff have the idea of being harmless, and they'll try and adopt harmlessness. And they'll say, oh, we're harmless. And they'll be fundamentally passive, and they won't be engaged in anything. But it's a misunderstanding. Because what's the difference between harmlessness and benign? Does anybody know the difference? So something which is harmless is fundamentally harmless. It can never be anything other. But something which is benign is that which could have been harmful but isn't. That which could be harmful but isn't. And that's a much truer statement about the human entity. Because I have the potential to do harm, but once I achieve the state of mastery of benign, then I will be just in my application. But we're getting benign. We're not doing words tonight, we're doing character. Okay, so then we have the capital G, which is the heart of the spiral. It's spiral dynamics, it's the balance of the male and the female. Because the line and the half circle that was egged down here has been uplifted to the world of the soul, and all of a sudden the relationship is complementary and functional, and we have spiral dynamics engaged. Gee, amazing. That's why it's the G-spot. Come on. It is the G-spot. That's what we're seeking. So, I want to pause at a moment to refer, to just talk about these characters, the descenders. There should be no descenders. They don't exist on any stencil in the world. Because on a stencil, all the characters are in line. Because they're supposed to be. This is the track of the mind. This here is the track of the mind. It's supposed to be in line there. You look at any other linguistic form on the planet, and whatever the frame of that language is, the characters will remain within it. They do not deviate except in our set. Where they say, oh, we've got ascenders and descenders. That's not true. We have the track of the mind, and all characters should be in it. Because we're referring only to mind. So, the very characters which denote achievement, upliftment, power, soul awareness, all of that, have fallen. They've fallen. I can't even write mine beneath the line now. You know, and others, I mean, I give people an experiment, which is to write with no descenders for 1 month and try and go back. And to say, but the point is, it's not an intellectual exercise, it's to do it. Because what I want people to do is to feel what happened when you try and go back after writing with no descenders. To feel it. I don't want to know what anybody said beforehand. I'm not interested in anyone's opinion. I want people to do it and then talk to me. Because this is about awakening the feeling mind. Because it will give you all the answers. And I will be honest and say that I've been doing descenders with folk for 5 or 6 years, and I've never had anybody go back. Ever. Nobody, not a single one. And I have fonts for computers, by the way. If any of you want the fonts for computers that have no descenders, I have fonts so that you can actually have your computer with no descenders in it. So, remember, there's a new paradigm of looking at the characters of the alphabet. It's totally mutually exclusive to having wiggly bits down here. Because there ain't no descenders as we move forward. What we're looking for evolution and ascension, which is about onwards and upwards, not away down below and backwards, that's for sure. So, turn up in quite a few characters up until now. Began in B after the platform of the capital A made it possible. So this is now, you know, the point of consciousness can tap the tempo for these flash moments regularly by this point. And we have the N first appearing here. That's the beginning. So it was intuitive it did end there. It was meant to be. We have N turn up here for the first time. So H is the beginning of mastery in the lower world. Mastery of the personality. And that's what follows G. So what follows the stabilization of the soul in its own world and spiral dynamics is mastery in the lower world. The mastery of the personality. But it's not game over yet. So capital H is actually deeply related to the capital I. You see the relationship there? They're a 90-degree shift of each other. Capital H is, you know that there's a line in the Bible, when thy two eyes become as one. This is about the two peoples, the ruler of the left and the right. The eye of the left and the right become knitted together in this framework of self-knowing. We resolve the conflict of the eye that wants chocolate and the eye that doesn't. The eye that wants a tidy house and the eye that can't be bothered. The eye that wants to pull this way and the eye that pulls that way. H is where they get resolved. And we have to look at ways that we use the H to get a sense of its quality. H is almost like an exhale. It's almost not even a character. In its own spirit, it's actually a breath. H is... There's a funny thing about characters, and that is that consonants are special. And it's because in English, we can't say them without a vowel. Try and say a consonant without a vowel in English and be understood. Because B is actually... D is... So consonant is consonants. It's without sound. It's away from sound. It's actually the biting off. Consonants is the interjection between when sound changes into something else. It's an incredible thing. And it's almost like the exhale, the breath of the H is a beautiful moment of personal respite, peace and achievement, of not needing to express, we can just breathe. So there's some theories in one of the old civilizations, I can't remember which one it is, but they said in the beginning was the word, and they thought the word was who, and they called their deity who, because they thought that was the first breath, was the first exhale, and therefore it was the first word, in their opinion, not mine, but that's their culture. But it's a wonderful thing to experience the beauty of that incredible character H. But what happens when the two separate pupils, the two pupils of the great eye resolve themselves, is you have the eye, the ruler, that we looked at last time, the singular eye, standing strong. And that's where this little ejaculation of the eye is about the ruler in the lower world and the soul free suspended in its own world, and us able to know the difference between the two. The first time I truly understand the little eye was actually at a mediumship session, and it was when I was aware of how much of my material had actually been as a result of trance and mediumship without me knowing. And it had been because I hadn't been aware of how able I was to receive transmissions because of how I used this part of my mind, and I didn't know that. But it was about my little eye and how it operated. And this gives rise to the big eye. And the big eye is the ruler, as we looked at the last session. You didn't do that, Rishi, but there's stuff online about that you'll be able to find out later. So eye is the ruler, is an incredible thing. But when we do eye with this line, top and bottom, this is about the ruler that understands its place, that understands its arena of governance. It's not the raging ego seeking to dominate all. It's contained, it's measured, it's present, and it knows that these are its tracks. These are its tracks. That's it. So this is when we get to the jive. So when we get this little flip beforehand, it doesn't mean much when we're looking at masculine character, but when we look at feminine character, these are jumps for joy of consciousness. These are little leaps of pleasure of the mind, where the jive becomes it's a little jump up, and it's to allow ejaculations of awareness like this to take place. And I use the word specifically. It's about the parts of our awareness that we can send into the unknown to receive new and bring it back and not lose our sense of self. But in India, the word Jai means victory. And it's a wonderful term because this character really is about victory. It's an incredible thing. Because when we look at the uppercase J, and the lowercase j compared to the I, what's the difference? And the capital J. If you remember the relationship between E and F, capital E, capital F, it's the same thing between capital I and capital J, which is we don't have this line at the bottom anymore. We're moving towards upliftment and ascension again, mentally speaking. Mentally speaking. And this is why we then end up on K. Now we didn't look at K last time, but actually, when we were doing shapeshift, but this is directly related to the actions of the ruler. Because this is about line energy expressed and projected. This is pure line energy. There's actually a formula for sovereignty. For those of you that were at the last session, let's not film this bit. The formula for sovereignty is actually a process of lines. I plus K equals L is the formula for sovereignty. And it is a process of lines. Now don't look at it like a maths equation. I takes charge, projects my discernment into the higher and the lower worlds, and I become the ruler of both worlds, the inner and the outer, space and time. We'll get to L in a moment because that is about space and time. So we have K here in the lowercase sense. It's about the line of the ruler, expressing that line energy, both defining, discerning, dividing where appropriately into that world, which is why K is such an action sound as well as being an ending sound. We don't have many true ending sounds that are abrupt. So really the only abrupt ending sounds are D and K. The rest of them are kind of rounded or they undulate. So you can end words with and but they're not bitten in the same, they're not snapped off in the same way as of K. There's a sound, or the D sound, which is very, very abrupt. And obviously capital K is about the realization of the soul in both worlds. And if you remember from the last session, what we are dealing with here is degrees of awareness, angles of consciousness. And so this is about us, this is masonry, this is the building of degrees of awareness and self-knowing, and how to use and express those things. So that's why once we have expressed our acts of discernment with the masculine, we then become the ruler of both worlds. So L is directly related to I, because it's a line, isn't it? So what we have with the lowercase l is what was only achieved in the uppercase before. So uppercase I was a freestanding line, but that was only in the uppercase, that was only in the world of the soul. Now we're looking at the same form in the world of the personality, the lower self. And that's why by the time we get to capital L, you have the ruler of both worlds, which is the horizontal, which is of now. So vertical awareness, vertical is now. And so that's about space. So now is always about where we are in relation to space. But the horizontal is about time. And when we become the ruler of the inner world and our outer state, we really do become the masters of our own space and time. We are able to master the presence of our space, which is, remember from the last session we were talking about mastering personal state? That's about what am I letting into my space? And then the time is about what I do with my space over a period. So really actually mastery of space has to come, well, it doesn't have to, but one of them has to come first basically. So some of you might be experts in time, you might be great time managers, but you might be terrible with how you manage space. I only realised in the last few months that my mastery was space and I was using it to overcompensate for my weakness with time. And I didn't realise that. This is my own learning process. So that's why I'm late, I overrun, all these things. It's because of my sloppiness with time. And I didn't realise I was actually overcompensating with my spatial mastery because I knew I was good in that area, thinking I don't have to worry about the time thing. And I've now learned that's not true. Really painful. I'm still weighing that one. I'm really struggling with that one. But such is life. So when we're the ruler in both worlds, that's when we get the arches. That's when we get the strongest shape. So this is about the two pupils, the two eyes again. So this is where they're both masters. Both masters. Yeah? And then N is when we unify that and we are as one. Okay? And then we get into the second half of the alphabet, which is what that master then does. So there's qualities of the second half of the alphabet that I'm not actually going to do with you because of time and because I want to talk about Engel or Angel. But you've got the first half now. What I'd invite you to do is, you may not be writers, you may not be people who write very much at all. I would invite you to take on a bit of shape and symbol and character play in what you're doing. Just a little bit. It doesn't matter if there's a lot. Maybe start taking a diary or just take anecdotal notes. The point isn't what you're writing, it's how you're writing and the mindfulness you apply to the act. And if you spend, as I say, just a month experimenting with no descenders and then go back to give you a litmus test of feeling, so you can see what, you can get the contrast of felt mind. So you're then in touch with your own baseline of where felt mind will start to express itself. And then from there, journey into the second half of the alphabet. Remember, if you go all the way back to A, that little seed that was planted here blossoms at this point. It's blossomed at this point. This is the blossom point. So anything after that, P, which is about power and presence and all those things, and then the Q and R and all those amazing characters after that, look at them in the context of lines and circles, and portions of lines, portions of circles, and portions of spirals, to get a sense of what they might be telling you about yourself and their application. Because when you start to get an understanding of the character, you're then ready for the next stage of spelling, the art of spelling, which is about using spelling from this level of paradigm thinking about the alphabet. It's a totally different use of how to spell and how to express yourself. And we are talking now about cymatic weavings. You're talking about being able to use character and sound to genuinely create and to genuinely shift stuff. Has anybody got any questions on that before we move on to actual Angel itself? Yes?
What do you think names have sort of, the name that you've given,
Yeah.
like how that's spelled and what the characters would be, do you think that has anything behind it?
Of course it does. Yes, it does. It does.
So just go through my head with my name? And I was
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. There is so much in a name. So much. I don't think we're given our names. I think that what happens is, I think we do actually choose them and effectively transmit them. I think some people who struggle in their lives may have not managed to get that transmission through to their parents. But genuinely, I've seen parents, and this happened with our little boy as well, some names just don't stick. A name sticks to somebody, it fits. And people know it because they're looking, oh, he doesn't look like that, you know? That's it. So the name is like, it's in our field, it's written in us, because we are the word. And actually your name is your process in life. Your name, first name, middle name, last name, is the process you'll be going through. The challenges you'll be facing and the mastery you might seek to achieve is written in your name. So the challenge based on certain character qualities will be either your strengths or your weaknesses, and you will have to explore them. Now, over an extended period of time with greater decoding the alphabet in terms of intuitive practice, we could as a group or as individuals or as one-to-ones start to unfurl the intuitive sharing of what the characters mean. Because the meaning isn't a word, it's a feeling. The word for that feeling will come in time, because we always have the feeling first, then come to terms with it. You have the feeling first, then come to terms with it. So as with this new paradigm language and this evolution of language, we've got to trigger, that's what I'm doing here, try to trigger felt mind experiences so we can chat later, so we can come to terms with it. Because then what we're doing is, we're starting to all be able to refer to the substance of our experience, not just in the lower world, but also the higher. And that is the challenge the New Age faces, because at the minute it's crippled by a lack of shared terms. There's no standard terminology that everybody agrees on for healing or energy or chakras or whatever. Everybody's got these different groups because we haven't come to terms with those things yet. And people, you've got this idea that people will have where they say, somebody will be trying to share a spiritual or an enlightened or an awakened experience that they have, and you might begin to struggle to express it, and somebody will interfere and give what I call the knowing nod, which is deadly. They'll pat you on the knee and say, don't worry. We've all been there. You don't need to worry. Words aren't needed there. We don't need words in that place. That's beyond words. That is crippling death. That's such laziness. It's such entropy. It's such going nowhereness. It just makes me want to stand and punch myself for a bit in disbelief. Because actually it becomes ever more important. Because the subtlety of the experiences. I mean, I'll give you an example. Where? So here we are in this room. And Buddha used to say words are signposts. Because he literally meant it. So I can say, chair. Or I can go. And if you're a human being on the planet, it doesn't matter whether you understand me, I've got the chair to point to. So I can compensate for my lack of terms or my poor terminology with pointing in the physical world. But say we go to the emotional world and I want to point out how I'm feeling. I've got to tell you my feelings. So what if I have a feeling that I don't know the word for? What might point out to you how I'm feeling?
It's written all over your face.
It's written all over your face, exactly. It's all over your face. So the face points out your feeling, even if you don't know the words for it. And you might walk into me and I'm like, you'd be like, Darren, are you alright? I'd be like, I'm fine, don't worry. And what I'm doing is I'm using a signpost to point you away from the truth. It's using spelling to misdirect you from my personal reality. But again, there's a giveaway, there's a support structure there to compensate for my poor terminology. But let's move to the next level, the level of mind. And let's say I want to point out what politics means.
Sarcasm.
Nothing. Nothing. It doesn't matter how I'm waving my arms, it doesn't matter whether I'm crying or laughing, if I'm not using the right words, you will never understand what politics means. Because it's only mental. It doesn't have emotional substance. It doesn't have physical substance. I might have an emotional reaction to something political, but that's not what politics is. So then we move beyond the realm of the mind and the intellect, which is third chakra. Let's say we get to the level of heart and soul, where soul is seated, or above the temple, or space-time. So then, what is the support structure to help compensate for my poor terminology? There isn't one. I've got to be bloody good with it, otherwise you're not going to have a clue what I'm talking about. You're like, he's crazy. He's stabbing in the dark. He's talking about nothing. And that's the reaction many spiritual people have when they're trying to relay their experiences to others, because they don't know how to use their language to refer to their experience. So it doesn't become less important, it becomes more important, it becomes essential. Especially at this moment in transition, until we all become telepathic, which is fine, that is possible, but we ain't there yet, we're in transition. Remember, there's no leaps, there's only steps. So this is the stepping process that I'm giving here, so that this, over time, with what we're going to do in a minute on the evolution of language, will change the shape of mind so that it can refer to those places. And we can come to terms with those experiences. So the whole of human evolution has been about people having internal aspiration, desire, or experience, and then looking to externalize that. And we're no different. The problem is we're facing a paradigm shift, which is out of the physical obsession. So for example, there was one time in the history of humanity when the greatest dream that could be had was something soft and comfy to sit on, like that sofa. And there we were, sitting there in the rain, fire, sitting on logs, sitting on rocks, and somebody's going, oh, can you imagine something you sit on that doesn't poke your bum? Could you imagine? Could you dream of that? Oh, I can picture it now. And maybe they built the first one, there was leaves and wood and fronds and stuff like that. But over time, that became the mighty sofa. But it's the same for everything. All of our mod cons, all of our indulgences, all of our escapisms, all of our tech, they're all the same. An internal aspiration, experience, or desire, they've got externalized. We're now doing that, but for spiritual experiences, for energy experiences. So how do we externalize that? Well, the first thing is, some people will build stuff themselves, but because we're going through a group evolution as a species, that's that coming togetherness, we've got to do it together. Damn it. I tried to leave you all behind, but life wouldn't let me. So this is the point of a coming together thing, of something we can all use to refer to those things. We've got to change the shape of the mind, because how you experience space and time when you're in that awareness is different to how you experience space and time when you're sitting in the office battering away on whatever, or taking a call at work, or doing things like that. It's a totally different paradigm of experience. So, I think I digressed from your name question there, didn't I? I hope I answered your name question. Your name is a process.
Yeah.
But what we'll do today, hopefully, is show you all how to convert your name into Angel. So you can convert it into the evolved language so you can see what your name is actually saying. So I want to give you the rules. I'm not going to give you all of the rules just now, but some of them, because I am aware of time. What time is it? I'm aware of time, but I don't know what it is.
9 o'clock.
9, okay, I won't be long. Right, here we go. It is exciting. So what we're doing here is we are looking at literally the evolution of language. So I'm going to use phonetics as being the indicator here, because otherwise, I'm even going to do a descender. So English. So I do English with an I to refer to those that speak without looking at what they're saying. So that's general, everyday speak. That becomes English when we have no descenders. So the first step is no descenders, then that will become Engel or Angel. And I do literally mean the language of angels, masters, off-world telepathy, fifth dimension, all of that. I'll show you why that is in just a moment. Right, so that's the journey we're going on here. So there are rules for converting our language into that language, into the language of mastery, and the language of spatial awareness. So rule number 1, there are no descenders. No descenders, that's the first one. While there are still descenders, it cannot be an evolved language. It just can't be. It will always be tainted by that which is beneath. It will always be subject to the influence of the subhuman and the less than human, the basal, possibly even the demonic. Rule number 2. Wherever a vowel exists to make you say a character, that should be a capital. Wherever a vowel exists to make you say a character, that should be a capital. So I just want to qualify what we're doing here. So all structures of the old world have been subjected to what's called transitional extremism, which is art is a good example. So you've got all these people doing fine art, millions of pounds. Tracy Emin comes along and says, my messy bed is art, 20 million, cheers, or whatever. So she's a transitional extremist in the art world. Damien Hirst is another one. So these are transitional extremists. They're saying, what, that's art, sod that, this is art. You know? And they're doing a real shaking up of the old world. And across the world we're seeing transitional extremism, which is extremism in a way, but it's to break down ingrained structures. It's just a function of it. So what's happened is transitional extremism has already awakened in the young. And it started to come through in e-speak and text speak, with a reintegration of capitals and number in an experimental and playful form. What I'm going to be showing you here is about how that stabilizes into a new linguistic form. So it's a stabilization of the transitional extremism of text speak and e-speak into something which is usable and has meaning and is stable. So when I say it has meaning, I mean it points somewhere, it leads somewhere, it has a function. So an example, this is an example of a vowel that exists to make us say a consonant. So when I say a consonant, I mean like P, Q, A. So for example, A is a good one. So space, uplifted, no descender, capital A. Yeah? Space. Another example. English, so N, E-N, get rid of the E because it's just to make you say N. Okay, I'll give you a better example. Entrance. So remember I do the entrance for put under a spell. It doesn't mean way in, it means put under a spell. You see on all the doors of companies and stuff, we think it says entrance. It doesn't say entrance, it says entrance. In this example, we're changing the E to tell us that it's the N. So another example is the word elementary. L-M-N-R-E. Capital L, capital M, capital N, lowercase t, uppercase r, lowercase y. Elementary. I want you to say it with me. Elementary. Okay. And now I want to put the word speaks. So if I say the ruler speaks English. So I speaks angle. So, second. I speaks angle. Capital P. Try and say it, emphasizing the capital P. I speaks angle. I speaks angle. What it yields is perfect pronunciation of character. Perfect character. Elementary. So the T becomes perfect in its pronunciation. It's perfected. The next rule. Whenever there is a trailing vowel to make you say a lowercase consonant, get rid of it. Example. Example. Without that lazy trailing E that's in English, the L is perfected. Try it. Example. Example. You get a perfect L, a perfect P, and a perfect X. It is the perfection of pronunciation of character. Perfected. Words like this are wonderful examples because the more you play with it and the more you work with it, the more perfected your character becomes. The more you think, talk, speak and write like that, the greater you are expressing the ruler, because as one speaks angle, one speaks more assertively. One starts to speak as the royal one that we were looking at last time. And it can come across slightly charged because it's loaded with that awareness. There's power. I dare speak proper angle with you all because I terrify myself. I'm not even joking, I terrify myself with it. It's so powerful. So I invite you all to try it privately because your own power of presence and pronunciation that can take place with perfected character like this is staggering. If you take, I'm starting to do documents in a wiki where I've got the two languages side by side. And it is incredible the difference that is yielded with this. Now, there's a few other anomalies, so that's the next rule. Trailing vowels. Get rid of them. Get rid. But there's an exception to that rule. There's always exceptions to the rule. So there are some exceptions that bring on some of the later rules of angle. I won't be able to go into them all with you tonight. There are 7, but I'll give you the website that I'm putting it all on. So, there are control groups that need to be gone through for the mind to be able to pour itself through this portal of opportunity into new paradigm awareness and presence. Because what this yields is spatial awareness and presence of mind as you look and feel with these characters. So the silent group, the silent characters are all in control groups that need to be examined by themselves because of the quality of spatial awareness that they yield. So those examples are words like death. So death and doubt are good examples of showing you about how the silent characters are shapes out of context but are related to the shape. So death and doubt are 2 of the silent B words. They're in the silent B control set, and all the silent B words are about emotional control. They're about emotional control. How many of you do not do things in the world because of either debt or doubt? How many things can be nailed down to debt or doubt? It's about how silent B operates. Another silent B is bomb. Okay? How many people live in fear of bombs? Because of how they operate on the emotions. The silent G series is all about achieving the state of benign, achieving uplifted awareness. Those words are sign, rain, what else? There's a pile of them. They're normally the first group, but it doesn't matter. All of those, because that's a big subject in its own right, all of the silent character groups are to help the mind understand where it is and walk consciously into the new realm rather than waiting for a magical fix or some kind of spontaneous spiritual experience. This is walking from this side instead of coming from that side. Okay? So that's the silent, so all of this, so that's like words like light. So let's just do light and angle for a moment to give you a sense of the complexity of it. So light, as we write it in English, or we'll do it in English with an uplifted, so light, like that, is making us say which character? What's the character? It's making us say the character I. So when I say, so that's the word light, Ingle, light. Now the thing is, to get a perfect I in there, try it, light. So, do it a few times to yourself. Try and get that perfect I. You feel your mouth has to go wide and become big. What's happening there is, space is seeking expression through your expression. And this silent G and H, remember how amazing those two characters were when we looked at them in the alphabet? When they are silenced, they deliver spatial awareness of a quality that is untold, untellable, can only be experienced. But you must go through the process yourself with each of these to feel the shape and the space of the sound, like space. So say space, but try and emphasize a capital A, space. Now, so all of those silent characters come into a control group of their own. Now they become, in the science of language, wonderful columns of experimentation, because each of them is the same. You can use them as control group tests, like they use control groups in science. So your silent characters become control groups, and you can start to experiment in character development and understanding around them. So silent characters are one of the exceptions, and another very special exemption, very, very special, goes to the C. Okay? Now we don't have, I'm not going to go into the mystery of the C just now for you, as in the source of the C, but suffice it to say, the C is related to that alien visitor mind thing I was talking about last time. You know, in the last shapeshift. I was talking about visitor mind, the mind that is a visitor here, because it's not